My salutations to Shri Sadguru Yogi Nareyana Thathaya. Satcharitra of Shri Sadguru Yogi Nareyana Thathaya of Kaiwara. Chapter 3, Birth and Childhood of Kaiwara Yogi. The town of Kaiwara, where the abode of Sadguru Shri Nareyana is located, is on the Bangalore-Chintamani National Highway, about 10 kilometers away from Chintamani in Chikkaballapur district in Karnataka. During the early 18th century, there was a Balija couple named Kondappa and Madama who lived in parts of Kaiwara. Balija is a tribe, and usually they sell various merchandise such as bangles, flowers, turmeric, vermilion, toe rings, mangalia, necklaces, etc. Kondappa was meek and gentle. He was an earnest devotee of Sri Amora Narayana Swami. His day never started without a fresh morning visit to the shrine. Not until he had performed his worship of the deity with numerous flowers and basil garlands did he take his malara and go out peddling his wares. To him, the hereditary business was a form of dedication to the goddess Mahalakshmi. He never looked upon it as a means of earning a livelihood. His wife, Madama, was a soft-minded, pious woman. Her traits were virtue, devotion, and compassion, besides regular support and service to her husband. She was also very religious, participating regularly in the divine services at the shrine. Theirs was a middle-class household. Besides themselves, Kondappa's sister and her daughter lived with them. He pursued his community vocation of bangle selling, and lived a modest life with his meager but honest earnings. He never hankered after riches and luxuries. He turned an honest penny and wanted nothing beyond what was necessary for a Spartan life of simplicity. He was devout and religious. As mentioned already, Madama was his tailor-made wife, devout and spiritual. Her singular obsession was service to her husband and the Almighty. A contented housewife, she never wanted the usual worldly possessions like jewelry and flashy attire. She was an equally easygoing and hospitable housewife. It was a contented life, to be sure. However, there was some nagging disappointment and inadequacy. Halfway through their lives, they had no children yet. Though they shared the disappointment, it was Madama who was more affected by the inadequacy. Kondappa used to be too busy with his business rounds to be as worried about it as his wife. She used to brood over it for long hours, and the inadequacy became more pronounced whenever she happened to observe the cute, playful bubbling and amusement of the children of the neighbors. But she was always silent about it before her husband. She continued with her worship, charities, and social service. They never prayed to the Amora Narayana Swami for luxury or affluence. All they wanted was a son, which would qualify them for higher spiritual planes. As it happens, whatever our prayers and faith, there has to be some crucial moment when one's wish is realized, when gloom is dispelled by fruition. One has but to wait for it. And the moment came in the lives of Kondappa and Madama, during the Jestamasa Ustava of Amora Narayana Swami. They were spent in regular spiritual service to the deity. As ever, their common wish was to have a son. On the last day, they reiterated, "O Swami, we have observed our devout service for all the days. Please bless us with a son, which is our singular wish. He will, of course, be a gift from you, and will be named after you." After these prayers, they got back home and retired. Towards daybreak, Madama had a dream. It was a psychedelic experience. She realized the deity, Sri Amora Narayana Swami, had a blinding radiance equal to that of 1,000,000 suns. There was an accompaniment of ethereal music that pervaded everywhere. With his Abhaya Mudra, the deity was smiling and had benevolence upon her. Then, in a moment, that radiance condensed into a bright spark and entered her womb. The sudden incident in the dream jolted her awake. When she sat up dazed, Kondapa queried, "What is the matter?" She replied, "I have dreamt of a bright spark of light entering my womb." He was amazed. "How miraculous! I have dreamed of the same spectacle myself. It is a confirmation that the Almighty has granted our wish. An expression of His divine sport. His benevolence is eternal. Only, it is manifested according to one's devotion and trust. Besides, it is the prevalent opinion that any dream witnessed towards daybreak is a potential happening, a fact prophesied ahead. This is a clear indication that tomorrow Nareyana Swami will be born to you. This is his blessing, of course. As said in the religious scriptures, the protector of Dharma will arrive in the mortal world by means of the wombs of only the most devout women of spiritual maturity, who have renounced all material pursuits, and dedicated themselves to his service and devotion. Thathaya explains, his glory and omnipresence are not realizable by anyone born of promiscuity. As the days passed, Madama got in the family's way. Her pregnancy was progressing smoothly. The husband and wife were in the seventh heaven of expectancy. Of course, they had waited and waited for this moment, and the cherished moment was just a few days away. And then, there was something else. The sister of Kondapa, another member of the household, became morose. Her name was Dharmaka, a misnomer for her jealousy and greed. Actually, she was all the while hoping that the property of the childless brother would be handed down to her. But now that they were about to have a child, the deprivation was unmistakable. She was uneasy about the impossible prospect of owning the household property. Once the child was born, she would be lost. So she got busy scheming something to prevent the baby's birth, a method of destroying the embryo right in the womb. She waited. On that fateful day, Kondapa observed his morning prayers, took his wares, and went out on his usual rounds of business. No sooner was he gone than Madama began to labor. When it became unbearable, she called her sister-in-law, Dharmaka, and saw her opportunity. She consoled Madama, "Please don't worry, my sister. There is a position that will help you with smooth, painless delivery. Let me prepare it for you." Back in the day, it was a part of midwifery to brew a special potion that would facilitate painless delivery. So Madama had nothing to be suspicious about. The wicked Dharmaka brewed the potion but mixed it with poison. She brought it to Madama convulsing in pain, and urged her to take it. But she never knew that the baby in the womb was the potent supreme, at whose service was Adisesha, the supreme of the serpent world. So she was also unaware that the poison could do no harm to the baby. Madama suffered labor in addition to the venomous ingestion, and finally gave birth to a baby boy on the full moon day of the Falguna month in the year 1776 AD. It was the year Parabhava by the regional almanac, suggesting the dissolution of the darkness of ignorance by the radiance of truth. The child was the exalted protagonist, the hero of our present narrative, Nareyana Thathaya, the Sadguru of Shri Kaiwara Kshetra. At the time of his birth, flowers rained down from the heavens, rhythmic vibrations from the drums resounded from other firmaments, sweet bhajans pervaded all over, all the fauna romped about in joy, and the flora spread their fragrance far and wide. They harbingered the auspicious arrival of the great soul, Shri Yogi Nareyana Thathaya, into this mortal world. It is difficult to overstate the fruition and justification of any woman's life through motherhood. Madama was overwhelmed with the joy of giving birth to a little child of unequaled splendor. She fondled the child with a gush of affectionate kissing. As she knew that he was born of the divine essence of Amora Nareyana Swami, she said her prayers and felt the grateful elation of accomplishment. But her time was running out. The effects of poison began to show. Her body was turning cold and lifeless, and her limbs were slowly getting disoriented and limp. The women gathered around her with unease. Soon, it was clear that she was lost. The chaste woman was brutally poisoned to death by her sister-in-law. While meditating on Lord Amora Narayana Swami, the pious soul finally left the body for union with the divine. Meanwhile, when Kondappa returned home from his rounds, the delight of the newborn son was overshadowed by the grief of the sudden loss of the love of his life. She had been his chaste wife all alone, and his soul mate. She had never gone against his will. The sudden bereavement threw him into a sea of despondency. It was like he was half dead himself. He cried aloud, saying, "You have taken one life in exchange for another." Kondappa was torn between the bliss of seeing his newborn and the distress caused by his wife's death. He could not bear her separation and gave up his life for his wife. He followed her path to meet the divine. With the second death close upon the first, the relatives and other women were drowning in sorrow and confusion. They were lamenting, "Woe! This child, fresh from the womb, has lost both his parents. What a cruel twist of fate!" After a while, they reconciled themselves, and supervised the last rites for Kondappa and Madama. Alongside, the guileful Dharmaka put up a show of distress, denouncing the injustice of God. Hidden behind her crocodile tears was a nagging unease. What a turn of events! The child I wanted to kill is alive, while her brother and his wife are dead. Although she could have been genuinely sorrowful about their loss, the sentiment slowly withered under her greed. She thought, "As long as the child is alive, I will be denied the inheritance. So my mission is incomplete yet. Let me carry it through." She planned to kill the newborn. She waited until the dead of night when the town was asleep, took the infant, wrapped him in a jute sack, and went into the woods adjacent to the shrine of Bhimalingeshwara Swami, where she would strangle the newborn to death. As she was proceeding along, the drama unfolded. All of a sudden, she was suddenly confronted by a frightful snake. It was an unnerving spectacle. With a violent hiss, the snake charged at her. Dharmaka was petrified. Reflexively, she dropped the jute sack and took to her heels. The serpent carefully picked up the boy and placed him under a tree. It was, of course, none other than the very Adisesha who came to protect his master, Sri Mahavishnu. It went around the boy 3 times with great reverence, and held its hood high above him to afford shade. Dharmaka witnessed the sequence from afar, and was awed by the divine miracle that rescued the boy. She was now really flustered, and she fled. The next morning, when the priests of the temple and other deities got there as usual, they were astounded by the spectacle of the serpent holding cover for the child. How miraculous! This is not just a normal boy. His birth must be divinely designed. It seems like the great Adisesha is shielding the Mahavishnu from the elements. Even as they were busy wondering about it, the residents of nearby villages thronged the place. Meanwhile, the great serpent disappeared. The people identified the baby as the newborn son of deceased Kondappa and Madama. They recognized the divine glory of the boy, brought him back into the town. They decided to share the responsibility for his sustenance and welfare. Regardless of caste and creed, all the households came together. One household gave him a bath, while another fed him milk and put him to sleep. Another household gave him food, and yet another decked him out in new clothes. The townsfolk were very concerned about his decent upbringing, without any compromise of love and affection. That was how the baby boy slowly grew up on the lines of the waxing moon. When he grew out of infancy into boyhood, he visited all households. He made friends with the other children, and shared the fun and frolic. He would charm everyone with his liveliness and precocious discipline. He would wake up at daybreak, complete his ablutions, and worship the deities of Amora Nareyana Swami and Bhima Lingeswara Swami with great devotion. He would not take even a drop of water unless he was through with the worship with basil garlands and bay leaves. Such were his austerity and devotion. And it became his innate routine every day. Since it was a purposeful birth, all these traits were inborn rather than instilled. This is the end of chapter 3.